There is a timeless issue that is a common point of criticism for both Muslims and non-Muslims. Women in Islam. In this video, we present the most asked questions about women. If you think that there is injustice done to women in Islam, listen carefully. Here are the main questions asked about women. Does a woman have to obey her husband in Islam? Why does a man have more inheritance rights than a woman? Why is a woman's testimony considered half? Does Allah command beating women? Why does Islam allow polygamy? Let's examine these 5 questions more closely. First question. We know that in Islam, a woman must obey her husband. Doesn't this enslave the woman? We understand from Surah Al-Baqarah verse 228 that the rights in marriage are mutual. There is no implication that a woman must blindly follow what her husband dictates. A Muslim woman cannot be treated as a slave. Her legitimate demands must be met by her husband, just as his must be met by her. Obedience doesn't equate to slavery. It's about valuing and respecting each other's opinions, not only between spouses but even between friends. Marriage is a partnership that requires sacrifice. Spouses should try to please each other in order to preserve the love and respect between them. A home where a marriage is lacking in this ceases to feel like home. Instead, it resorts to power and ego battles between the man and woman. Islam always advocates balance and harmony, not oppression. Misunderstanding Allah's commands is what leads to the formation of enemies against Islam. Those who misinterpret Islam to oppress women under the guise of freedom are the true enemies. The second question. Why do men have more inheritance rights? Should it not be equal? Islam has given women rights that no other religion or ideology has ever given. Let's examine 3 examples. The first. Until marriage, the father has to provide for his daughter's basic needs. After marriage, this responsibility passes to her husband. Perceiving this as a weakness is just being narrow-minded. In addition to this, through mahar, a woman secures her financial security before marriage. Third is the issue of inheritance. Let's try to understand this with a simple example. If a father leaves $100, the son receives $66 and the daughter $34. While this may seem unjust, the daughter's share is exclusively hers, inaccessible to her brother or husband. The son, however, has to spend it on his mother, sister and wife. Thus there is no injustice. It's the people who exploit women who perpetuate injustice, not Islam. The third question. Is a woman's testimony considered half in Islam? Why is it necessary to have 2 women for testimony when 1 man is enough? First, we must accept the psychological and biological differences between men and women. The characteristics of a woman's nature are things like compassion, mercy and emotional sensitivity, while men exhibit strength and logical thinking. There will always be women who are more courageous or logical than men, but in legal and public matters, the general rules apply. If we look at Surah Al-Baqarah verse 282, it addresses the complexities of financial transactions, recognizing that disputes often arise. Given the gravity of such matters, men who are inherently better equipped to handle them are entrusted with this responsibility. In this respect, women are provided special protection, not relegated to a lesser status. The fact that the testimony of 2 women is equal to the testimony of 1 man does not mean that a woman is half of a man. Women have a more volatile and emotional psychology due to hormonal changes during pregnancy, postpartum or other situations. At the same time, the matters that require 2 female witnesses are matters that are not in the woman's area of expertise but more in the man's domain. For this reason, another woman is appointed as a supporter to help her in decision making. In addition, a woman's testimony alone is valid in matters that fall within her sphere and that others cannot understand. For example, if a child is born and there are differences of opinion about who the parents are, the testimony of the woman who delivered the child is valid only. Compared to a matter of debt, human life is more valuable, and a woman's opinion on such an important matter is more valid than anyone else's. Let's stop thinking superficially. Islam elevates women where it elevates the man. There can be no question of any injustice. The fourth question. Does Allah command beating women in verse 34 of Surah Nisa? We can't understand the horror of what is in this verse from life, so I would like you to empathize a little. What would you do or how would you feel if you caught the person you love with someone else? We are all well aware of the horrible scenarios that women have been subjected to by men who have been cheated on by their partners. Now let's examine the verse more closely. It doesn't address ordinary marital disputes, but rather women who transgress boundaries of honor and chastity. The instructions to a woman in this position are as follows. Don't scold, don't insult, and first give advice. In other words, try to settle it through dialogue. You may have misunderstood the situation. If this is not effective, separate the beds. If that doesn't work, beat her lightly. The term lightly has its special conditions. You can't hit her in the face. You definitely can't hit her in the waist or the chest. You can only hit her on the back or flesh with the tip of 4 fingers, so as not to redden the flesh. The expression beat lightly in the verse does not mean that all men can beat women as they please. When you act according to this verse, even if your wife commits immorality, you can't attack her as you like. Allah recommends patience and warning until it comes to the act of beating. This verse, which is perceived as permitting violence against women, is a verse that protects women from violence. It cannot be applied in arbitrary situations. If a man uses violence against a woman by saying that there is a license in Nisa 34, he is denying the Quran and will be held accountable for it in the hereafter. We would also like to point out that there are 3 views on the subject, and our explanation was the explanation of the scholars who accepted the meaning of the verb daraba as beating, which is the harshest view. So even when we take it in its most severe dimension, the verse's use of hitting is used in the sense of bringing her back to consciousness. Allah is the owner of absolute justice. When we consider the Quran as a whole, we see that the terms honor and chastity do not only apply to women. Allah will understand, care, and protect the woman's pain in case of deception as much as the man's in a similar case. The 5th question: why does Islam allow polygamy? So according to Surah An-Nisa verse 3 of the Quran, Islam allows polygamy. A man can have up to 4 wives, but on which conditions? Polygamy wasn't something that was brought on by Islam. In fact, within societies that existed before Islam, polygamy was common and seen as a good thing. During a time where people would have 10 to 20 spouses, Islam actually reduced that number to 4 and only for necessary situations. Outside of these situations, Islam always recommended to only have 1 spouse. Our religion appeals to every aspect and all the areas of our lives. Problems are solved according to all the possible outcomes. A permit like this had to be given in order to find solutions for these problems. When we look closely into the ayah, we see that conditions are a major requirement to prevent it from being implemented in any type of case. Islam tells us that if a man is worried about not being able to treat them equally, then he should only marry 1 person. Even if there's the smallest chance that a man won't be able to act fairly, or if he has any worries about this situation, it's absolutely not permissible for him to have a 2nd wife. Surah An-Nisa ayah 129 of the Quran tells us, you will never be able to maintain justice between your wives no matter how keen you are. From this we can understand that the Quran recommends monogamy. Polygamy isn't a command in Islam. It's not an act of greatness or piety. It's an authorization for vital situations only. For some reason, the ones who criticize Islam for allowing polygamy don't show that same reaction to those who do zina or the husbands doing one-night stands. Islam doesn't allow casual, temporary, fake relationships. Islam says that if you want that woman, you need to provide a home for her and be ready to take on all her responsibilities. Let us remember the war years in history and the losses in the male population. Many countries went through these periods. There was a surplus of women against the millions of men lost in the war, and the only solution many states found to this situation was polygamy. We can't ignore such extraordinary situations, and we can't ignore the solutions polygamy offers. In other words, it establishes a system that completely prevents the devaluation of women. Also, during marriage, a woman may not approve in advance of the possibility of her husband taking a 2nd wife in the future. If she stipulates that she doesn't want this, he has to comply with this condition. In conclusion, please don't allow the misdeeds of some individuals to distort our understanding of Islam's teachings. Islam doesn't categorize people based on whether they are wealthy, poor, peasants, villagers, city dwellers, Easterners, Westerners, slaves, masters, men or women. They are divided into believers and non-believers. In Islam, people are valued for their faith, taqwa and morality, not their lineage, beauty, wealth or status. It is not Islam that discriminates and marginalizes, but those who display Islam incorrectly.